Hello and welcome to this video on how to debug your own custom ComfyUI node with VS Code. So first thing you want to do is make sure ComfyUI is running and you have it open to the web UI here. And obviously if you're debugging your own custom ComfyUI node, you want to make sure that it's actually within your workflow. So mine that I created is called Image Sizer. And then once you have all that set up in ComfyUI, you're going to open up VS Code to the ComfyUI installation directory. And once you're in there, you're going to open up your custom node. So for me, that's at ComfyUI custom nodes, and then mine's called Image Sizer, so I have it open up here. And so now we can see the code that we wrote, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. And maybe the first thing you're going to ask yourself is, where do I want to debug, or how do I start? A good place to start is going to be in the run function, because that's doing the main part of your custom logic, right? There's a lot of different parts to a custom node. We have these sort of config stuff up here, more config stuff down here, but really the run is the most interesting logical place to put what are called breakpoints. And that'll bring me to the next point. You can put breakpoints wherever you want in the Python file in your run function. But I think a good place to start is to put one at the beginning and one at the end. So when we put one at the beginning, we're going to stop at this line. We're going to break at this line. And then we can make sure all of our parameters up here that are passed in are correct. So we can make sure we have the right model type, aspect ratio width, and aspect ratio height. Of course, all these parameters are going to be different depending on the node that you're debugging. But that's a good place to start to make sure that everything is correct when you begin your process. And then you can put another breakpoint down here at the end to make sure that you did all the logic in between correctly and are going to return the right result. So how do we attach? How do we get started? How do we tell the debugger to go, right? So if you think about it, you've got ComfyUI running over here on the left already. It's already doing things. And so now we need to basically tell VS Code that, hey, we have this thing that's running and we have this code that is within the thing that's running. Tell VS Code to, like, what's called attach to it, to hook into it. So what's the first step there? Firstly, we need to make sure that the Python extension is installed, that it will allow us to debug Python. So go ahead, search for that in extensions. It looks like this little box with the extra box coming out, and install that extension. You can see on the sort of thing that pops up here, IntelliSense, linting, and debugging. That's what we want, is debugging. And once you have that installed and you've restarted VS Code to apply the changes, we're going to come into the Run and Debug menu. And then we hit Run and Debug. It'll present you with a menu of options. And since I already did that, it knows which one to pick for me. You're going to select Attach to Process within that list. And then it will give you a whole big list of processes that are running on your computer, because VS Code doesn't know exactly, there's a lot of stuff going on your computer, which one should it talk to, right? And it should be pretty smart. It should select python.exe, and you can see here, this is the one for ComfyUI. And if that's not correct, you can go into your task manager here, and we'll go to Details. And you should probably be looking for one that's called Python. And the way that I know this is the right one, you can see it's using a fair amount of memory, a fair amount of GPU. That's the big giveaway, right? Anytime you do anything in ComfyUI, it's going to use a lot of your GPU. So you can usually sort by those two things and find the right one. And the piece of information we're looking for here is the PID, the process ID. Every process on your computer has a different ID, and this is the one we care about. So 18000. So you sort of mentally note that, then you go to Run and Debug and you make sure that's the right one, or you find it in this list. You see how every process here has its own ID. That's the thing you care about. So once you've found the right process to attach to, you can click that and you can see it's trying. And if you wait a little bit, it will eventually attach. It'll sort of stop trying. And the way you can tell that it actually did the right thing, right? We have this menu up here at the top with all these controls, and then we have the call stack. And if I sort of hover over, right, we have this pause button. Don't press that. That's not going to really do anything fun. But just know, hey, I'm attached. That's what this is saying. So in order for ComfyUI to get to this code, we actually have to queue a prompt, right? It's going to use this stuff when we hit queue prompt. And one thing that can happen here is ComfyUI is pretty smart, right? So if I hit queue prompt, it's not actually going to hit my breakpoints, and that's because ComfyUI has cached the value of this node. You notice, right, if I hit queue prompt after changing nothing, ComfyUI will not highlight any of the stuff, which says it's not running any of the code on these nodes. But if I change this, right, if we're going to have a wider image than we are going to have tall, and I hit queue prompt, then we're going to get into here because ComfyUI has said, oh, something's changed. I need to rerun this code. So just a little tip there if you ever find that it's not hitting your breakpoint. So we've hit our breakpoint. You notice it tells us the current line because it's highlighted in yellow. And we're also getting some output from ComfyUI. You might have noticed this sort of stuff in the little console window that you have running ComfyUI, and now it's being piped into here as well as the console info window. So we have our current line here. Let's just talk about the basics of what's going on. Firstly, we have our controls up here. This is going to be continue. This will run the program until the next breakpoint, or we'll just let it run sort of indefinitely if there are no other breakpoints. So you press continue, just sort of let it go on its own. And then you have step over, which will go from this statement to this statement, or from this one to this one, right? Step over the next line, step into, step out of. That'll go inside and out of. If you have something more complicated, you're calling your own functions in here, that's a good one to use. Probably not going to use that if you're watching this video because you probably already know what debugging is. We're not going to use restart, and you can use the disconnect to unattach your debugger from the running ComfyUI process. Probably don't really need to do that either, unless you really care about that sort of stuff. So what else here? And you notice on the left we have our variables, and we have locals and globals. Globals is going to have everything that the program sort of sets up on its own in what's called a global state. That global state is available to all the different pieces of the program all the time. And because of that, it's very hard to use, and you should really avoid using it, and you're probably not going to need to touch this at all. The best thing for you is going to be your locals, right? This has all of the local variables that are defined. So we notice we have our model type, we have our aspect ratio width and our aspect ratio height. All of your parameters will be in here. And then if I hit step over, it's going to execute line 34 and set total pixels equal to the value of this expression. And then notice it comes up in there. And so to sort of inspect that further, right, we can click this little arrow to expand things. And this is sort of special Python stuff, but right, we have our SD and our XDXL. Those will have the values that we expect. That's perfect. So we've looked at this sort of control menu up here. We've looked at our variables. The last thing to look at is what's called our debug console. And this will allow you to execute arbitrary Python code as if it was in the program right now, right? So I could copy this and paste it in here and press enter, and that will get me the same answer as the program got previously. So we can execute sort of arbitrary stuff, right? So I can say print, and that will print for me. I can redefine things. So if I say total pixels equals just like an empty object, you notice that the value has changed, right? You can affect your program by writing things in this debug console. Now, I actually don't want to do that, so let's set that equal to that. So super useful, super powerful. You can also mess up your program if you're not careful, right? You notice I was able to set total pixels to an empty object, and if I let this line continue, when I set that empty object, it would throw an exception, right? It would blow up, it would error out. So you can mess up your program by typing things in here too. So just, know what you're doing. So let's hit continue, and we'll get down to line 50. And now we've run our whole custom ComfyUI node run function. We've verified our parameters, and we're getting to the last statement, the important statement that will determine our output and what we're going to send to the other things. So I think a really good practice here is to just take exactly what is on that line right there and see what it gives you, right? So this returns 724 by 362. This is a 2-to-1 ratio. That looks about correct to me. Perfect. So if you want to let things continue, you can just hit continue, and you notice the image generation sort of continues on, and we have our image here. All right, that's it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And if you'd like to learn how to make your own custom ComfyUI node, check out this previous video I made.